Ooh, I think this beat is tickling my brain, but in a good way. And these beeps and boops really do a great job reflecting the tech industry aesthetic of the early 2010s. Shout out to Tristan Kraus for the beat, his second beat ever for ERB, and first literally since the second episode, the first Vader vs. Hitler battle. Sure, he ain't no all-rounder as far as fame, fortune, and the quantity of collaborations, but he's sure making up for it with this kind of quality. And we've got Lloyd here as a pretty spot-on looking Bill Gates in the red sweater. Gotta love it, looks like a proper dork.
Let me just step right in.
No, Peter, let me just step right in, because it's time for my theme song and a word from our fans. As always, thank you to Poner, Timey, and Laser Panda for supporting the show. I recently hosted a game show challenge with Poner and Panda, so go check that out after this video if you haven't already. It's a hoot. And for Jobs and Gates, Poner and Timey both had their own analyses of the battle, which we'll save for the end since they both echo a lot of my sentiments regarding the battle, and they have a lot to say. But Timey did make this, so bask in the comedy glory.
It's so sad Steve Jobs died of Ligma.
Who the hell is Steve Jobs?
Ligma balls.
Thank you all again for watching and supporting. Let's get back to Steve Jobs' first verse before the Ligma gets him.
Let me just step right in. I got things to advance.
And Nice Peter has gotten so good at these power moves. He literally is so powerful here that he busts in and cuts off the announcer because he's too busy to wait for his title card, which is very funny and very in character for Steve Jobs, who cultivated an image of himself as a tech genius who is always working around the clock. May end up being the quickest point I'll ever award on this show.
I'm an innovator, baby, change the world. 4 to 500 before you kiss the girl.
God, and he's not even really saying much beyond hyping himself up, but we've got the booty dance, the hand kiss, and such a tight flow to go with this beat, and I think Peter deserves another point here for getting the verse off to such a strong start.
I'm a pimp, you're a nerd, I'm slick, you're cheesy.
It's a good line. It's playing off the theme of those late 2000s Mac commercials that starred Justin Long, where Apple is the cool, young tech company and Microsoft is the middle-aged, lame one. And it's definitely the image the two companies still had when this episode came out. I think at the time I may have awarded a point, but the idea behind it has gained maybe some dramatic irony over the years, which undercuts it. Besides the obvious fact that Justin Long is now pushing 50, which, what the hell, when did that happen? But the entire Silicon Valley tech bubble is also showing similar age. Compared to the early 2010s, it's difficult to have that same techno-optimism. I'm keeping it neutral. I mean, the line sounds good, but we've just flown too far from the time when this line would have been a point.
Beating you is Apple too easy.
It's a slick little bit of wordplay. The Apple II is basically the Apple computer that brought the company to the forefront of the PC market and helped computers break into homes in a big way. Still, it's just an I'm gonna beat you line, a good one, but still a neutral.
I make the product that the artist chooses.
Now this is going back a bit to that Apple is slick, Microsoft is cheesy comparison, with another branding point Apple used at the time being that they were the computer for the artsy types, because the interface was generally simplified so the stereotypically less tech-savvy artists could easily hop right onto them without needing any computer literacy. I'd say it's a distinction that still exists to an extent in 2026, but to a much lesser degree, with Apple realizing somewhere along the way that they needed to cater a little bit more towards the tech crowd and offer more options for those who needed a computer for more serious work. Microsoft, in turn, realized that they needed to have a more approachable interface on their PCs. These days, the two companies kind of feel interchangeable. I mean, heck, I use both platforms for different aspects of my own video production. In terms of the battle, I guess it's a valid point to bring up, but even at the time in the real world, it seemed like a weak brag to advertise that your platform was specifically designed to be more limiting, even if there was some sort of design sense behind it. I think maybe it's a wash and we'll just call the whole thing neutral.
And the GUI that Melinda uses.
Now that's pretty funny. Melinda, of course, is Bill's wife, or was at the time. Honestly, now that they're divorced, this is even funnier, but the implication here is that Melinda is cheating on Bill with Apple products, the GUI being the graphical user interface, basically the software for running most of what you visually see and interact with on a screen. It's a fantastically cheeky I stole your girl type line, and it sounds really funny too, so easy point.
I need to bring up some basic shit. Why'd you name your company after your dick?
I can't lie to y'all, sometimes I'm just randomly going about my day and this line pops into my head. It's so funny and such an obvious but hilarious burn. I mean, Microsoft. Sure, it's referencing, I guess, microchips and software, but it's so blatantly questionable as a name, and Jobs just goes ahead and says what we're all thinking. Heck, I'm saying a 3 since it's so memorable for me personally.
Blowjobs, you arrogant prick.
Boof, that's a bit dumb. And it's not working for me like that Microsoft line. I think this is wordplay that could have earned a point if written a bit more cleverly, but this just feels bare bones and obvious. And while arrogant prick isn't exactly an incorrect description for a man who denied himself cancer treatment because he was sure that eating fruit would cure him, Gates doesn't say anything to preface it that actually quantifies the diss, so it stands as kind of a random insult with no teeth.
With your secondhand jeans and your turtleneck.
Again, criticizing the turtleneck and jeans outfit that all the Silicon Valley people ripped off from Jobs isn't wrong per se, but Bill Gates, the man of billions of dollars and not a single troy ounce of fashion sense, does not get to be the guy to make that criticism.
I'll drill a hole in the middle of your bony head.
Weird line here, a bit unclear what it's going for since I don't think there's any sort of tech reference in there, and drilling a hole in someone's head feels bizarre as a threat, and calling someone's head bony is a weird insult. Honestly, negative, it doesn't vibe right with me, and I feel like there had to be better disses on the table than these.
With your own little spin of big ball of death.
Okay, it's trying. The spinning rainbow of death was basically the icon that Apple computers and laptops at the time would give when the machine had more or less hard crashed, and would almost always require a reset to fix. Many an hour of school essays, music production, and video editing was lost to this rainbow. That said, I don't think Gates does enough with the line for a point, and it doesn't tie well enough with the previous one to call it good wordplay. Again, there's probably some sort of decent diss you can make against Jobs for being a filthy, stinky hippie, and you could probably level some valid criticisms against the hypocrisy of a guy who's a tech billionaire who also publicly espouses 60s counterculture ideals. And you could even probably tie it in with the spinning rainbow in the previous line, but Gates does literally zero of that legwork here. So it's a completely out of left field single word attempt at an insult that goes nowhere and does nothing. I guess neutral? Now, you know what? It's simply too lazy, and in this case, I'm calling it out. Negative point.
You got given up at birth.
Yes, and it's true, Jobs was adopted. He knew this from a young age and saw his adoptive parents as his true parents, disliking that they were even called his adoptive parents and referring to his biological parents as his sperm and egg bank? Ew, that's a disgusting way to put that. What the fuck? Anyway, I'm sure there's a way to write this as a decent diss with a "you're so annoying, not even your parents wanted you" being the obvious one. But instead, Gates just states a true fact, with the only way to imply this as a diss revolving around the assumption that I guess adopted kids are inherently inferior, which is bad. That's messed up. When a diss only works if you're being prejudiced against a group of people, you've done bad writing. It's a negative.
I give away your net worth to AIDS research.
There's potentially a lot to unpack here, and I went spiraling down a rabbit hole regarding the impact of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on global healthcare and education, but none of that really matters because at its core, this is just a wealth measuring brag. And sure, around 2010, Gates did have like 9 to 10 times the net worth Jobs had, but I just can't be brought to care. Because to me, anything past like $500 million is just kind of in the realm of way too much money for one person. And it's really hard to feel like the difference actually matters when you get to those numbers. And in a way, the paradox of using the amount of wealth you give to charity to brag about your wealth, I think accidentally reveals why in real life Bill Gates and people like him are such hateable figures, regardless of how much they pledge to give away. I could go on, but at a certain point, this would all be better for an economics or political science thesis paper. I'll instead just give a simple negative as an acknowledgement that Gates here basically kneecapped his own respect and credibility within the battle, which feels weirdly fitting for the guy who fumbled through the existence of Xbox as a brand, but also isn't what you want to do to yourself in a rap context.
Should I know you little toys and I still crush that?
Going back to the Xbox analogy, this is the same energy as when Microsoft would try to say Xbox is bigger than PlayStation because Microsoft is a bigger company than Sony. And technically, that argument didn't even work around when this battle came out because Apple was valued about equal or maybe even higher than Microsoft. And Gates can dismiss all of Apple's products as little toys, but the fact is, devices like the iPod and MacBook were cultural phenomenons in the 2000s and early 2010s, and the iPhone can make a very real case for being the most important tech invention, certainly of the past past quarter century and maybe even longer. Nothing Microsoft or Bill Gates has done really matches that impact. It's just a general bragging statement, so I guess I'll keep it neutral, but I'm also rejecting its basic premise.
iPhone, iPad, iPhone, I smack.
He's playing on the general naming convention of Apple products, but also he just proved my previous point by using Apple names as the basis for the wordplay. He didn't make a Zune-related pun, or talk about Internet Explorer, or hit him with whatever this thing's called. The Surface? Yeah, the Microsoft tablet is called the Surface. Sure, I guess it definitely is a Surface, and the Xbox is in fact a box with an X on it. The Microsoft marketing team, folks, they remain undefeated. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is Gates is accidentally hyping Apple up by relying on how iconic the naming convention is for this joke. So it's a negative point just for that. Add to that how bad of a line iPhone, I smack is, and it's an easy red for me.
A man uses the machines you build to sit down and pay his taxes.
Going back again to that same idea of Microsoft being the lame and boring company, but leading with your computers are used for pretty important stuff is, in my opinion, a bit of a rough starting point, but let's see where it all goes.
A man uses the machines I build to listen to the Beatles while he relaxes.
Of all the artists, he could have just said to listen to music while he relaxes, but no, he had to choose the band that Apple specifically had been in a long-standing and public legal battle with over the name Apple Music. I get the point he's trying to make with all this, but there's a wonkiness to using the Beatles specifically in this context that's a bit hard to ignore. And in a broader sense, comparing listening to music and paying taxes feels a bit apples and oranges. I don't think it's the hardest fumble, maybe more of just a spill, but I do think it's a negative point.
Well, Steve, you steal all the credit for work that other people do. Did your fat beard Wozniak write these raps for you too?
Finally, Gates hits us with something juicy. So a huge criticism of Steve Jobs is that he was a bit of a Thomas Edison figure. What I mean by this is a guy who's at the head of a major tech company and is the face of it more or less, but who does very little actual work, is mostly the ideas man, but in a lot of ways still takes all the credit when behind the scenes, it's only thanks to the work of many brilliant engineers and designers that the ideas come to fruition. This is a very fair criticism. Obviously, Jobs was important to Apple in many ways, but as often happens with CEOs in large corporations, his influence is overstated, while the work of the little people goes often uncredited. I mean, really you could level the same insult against Gates, but I digress. It's still a really good diss, and bringing in the accusation of ghostwriting by Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple who did basically all the actual programming work in the early days, makes this for me a bit of a mic drop moment, and definitely a three-pointer.
Everybody knows Windows bit off Apple.
Now to preface, I love how for this next part, they make the battle feel a bit like a TED Talk presentation, or a tech debate. They do this fun call and response thing with disses and clapbacks flying back and forth. It's an awesome way of shaking up the actual structure of a rap battle, and basically the improved sequel of what they first attempted in the Lloyd vs. Peter Season 1 finale. In this first exchange, Jobs gets a point for accusing Microsoft of ripping off Apple. There's some truth to it, with Apple often being the industry leader and Microsoft essentially doing a lot of copying Apple's homework with their products. But mostly it gets a point because of the wordplay of bit off Apple, which is too good.
I triple the profits on a PC.
But Gates also gets a point here because he's basically responding, sure, you were first, but I did it better. And in this case, the fact that Microsoft had such a higher market cap than Apple does actually justify the brag.
All the people with the power to create use an Apple, and people with jobs use PC.
I'm seeing a neutral for both on this back and forth. It's basically just reiterating the premise again that we've already established of Apple is the hip artist company and Microsoft is the lame office worker company. And I'm getting kind of bored of it.
You know, I bet they made this beat on an Apple. Nope, Fruity Loops, PC.
I'm gonna have to go ahead and assume that this statement is true. I don't know what software Tristan Krause used in the early 2010s, but assuming he did use Fruity Loops, it's a point for Gates. It's a really funny breaking of the fourth wall moment and a solid rebuttal to the assertion that Microsoft isn't for artists.
You will never, ever catch a virus on an Apple.
There's a fairly common tech myth that Apple products are immune to computer viruses, with reasons I've personally heard including Apple's software being too secretive or complicated to program a virus for, Apple being so good at antivirus protection that they stop any hacking attempts before they can even start, and my personal favorite, that Apple represents such a relatively small segment of the market that hackers simply don't give a shit to program a virus for it. While there may be some level of truth to any and all of these given reasons, they ignore the fact that this is simply not true. Apple products can and have been infected by various forms of malware over the years. That said, it is also true that Apple products have tended to get less viruses less often than Microsoft products. So although never ever catch a virus is a bit of a hyperbole, this is still a decent software-related brag with factual roots and it's worth a point.
Well, you can still afford a doctor if you bought a PC.
Damn, so true. While these days, sure, you can buy a pretty dang expensive gaming PC, you can still generally find devices running Windows software for pretty cheap, which will provide all the basic computer necessities, while Apple products tend to still run with a fairly premium price tag, even with the company's attempts to introduce some lower cost options over the years. And this price difference was, I'd argue, much more pronounced back when this battle came out. Apple had and still maintains a reputation as the rich person's tech company, and especially back in the early 2010s, it wasn't uncommon to come across people in low-paying job positions, blowing huge chunks of their bank accounts to own the latest iPhone, which gave pretty similar energy to the back end of the decade trend of seeing baristas with Gucci belts for their Costco jeans. Anyway, I think this is a phenomenal clapback and definitely worth a three-pointer.
Let's talk about doctors. I've seen a few because I got a PC, but it wasn't from you.
I've always found this part a little odd. Instead of a diss or anything, these bars are basically plot for the episode. It's actually fairly innovative that ERB started implementing this type of thing, really taking advantage of these being YouTube videos, which can tell a story rather than just pieces of music. That's all fine, honestly. What I find odd is Jobs referring to his pancreatic cancer as APC. I get the wordplay, but this has to be the wonkiest turn of phrase imaginable. But hey, it took this guy in the comments 8 years to realize the double entendre, so maybe it was brilliant. I hope that guy's okay. Shout out if you're watching right now. And I'm sorry, I know I dropped this earlier, but I need to reiterate, yeah, he saw some doctors about his APC, but then literally ignored treatment advice because he believed eating fruit could cure cancer. And he was super wrong. The 9-month delay in proper treatment before he reconsidered allowed the cancer to progress significantly, and he regretted this decision near the end, believing it essentially cost him his life. Yes, Steve Jobs built a legacy, and that legacy is the legacy of Silicon Valley big tech. The legacy of believing so much in your own hype, so much in your own correctness, and so much in a utopian vision, and so much in the very idea of shaking things up, that you ignore every truth sitting in front of your face until the ground is literally collapsing below your feet. We've seen it happen time and time again, especially during the past decade's tech boom, and it's so fascinating watching this ERB, which came out at the peak of that era's techno-optimism, with this dramatic irony of knowing what would follow. Steve Jobs is the encapsulation of everything modern big tech, which is both sweeping praise and damning criticism. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Please clap.
I built a legacy, son. You can never stop it. Now, excuse me while I turn heaven a profit.
Honestly, even after saying all that stuff, this still gets a point. Saying I'ma turn heaven a prophet and dying, that's cold.
Fine, would be like that? Die then! The whole world loves you, but you are my friend!
Man, we haven't had a good old absolute nonsense line yet, so here we are. This one's bothered me from day one, because either the wording is wrong or the tone is wrong. It could either be that Gates is expressing remorse that his friend died and highlighting that the public loved Jobs as fans, but Gates himself loved Jobs as an actual friend and peer. But in that case, why does Gates sound angry about it? And why does the "but you were my friend" sound so much like it's trying to directly contrast the "whole world loved you" line? It's presented in a way that implies Gates is saying he didn't love Jobs. So the line could also be missing a contraction, with either the script or Lloyd while performing failing to say, "you weren't my friend," which is my preferred reading because to me it makes more sense with everything else, but this reading also requires a lot to have gone wrong in the production process that I'm not sure is realistic to have happened. Either way, neither vision of the line is a great representation of the real relationship between Jobs and Gates, which was fairly complicated and involved many positive and negative emotions and interactions. In any case, this line is just jacked up, and it needs to be a negative.
Friend, I'm alone now with nothing but power and time, and no one on earth who can challenge my mind!
This moment is super goofy, and I see what they're going for with his overacted, slightly maniacal take on Gates, but still, I'm not overly in love with his general read for the character. They made him this kind of tech gremlin, and Gates is a bit of a weird dude, and he may be but he's also always presented himself as a bit more reserved, and I think him being a more quiet dork would have been a better counterpoint to the more energetic and camera-ready Steve Jobs, who I think Peter kinda nailed on this one. But, well, this is what we got, I guess.
I'm a boss! I own DOS! Your future is my design!
Yeah, again, all I'm getting is Sheen when he has that big brain in that one Jimmy Neutron episode. Also, DOS is referring to MS-DOS, which was a pretty impressive software back in the day. I mean, it's basically like what a computer system used to be. You'd run DOS on an IBM, and that's basically the foundation for everything that exists now. But also, like, who cares, man? DOS hasn't even existed for longer than I, and I think most of you watching have even been alive. Microsoft discontinued in 1994 to make way for the Windows platform, with the exception, I believe, believe, of a few bits and pieces of code and certain features not being fully removed until Windows ME in 2000. He's bragging about owning a thing which hasn't existed in this century and hasn't been used by anyone except dedicated software hobbyists for decades. It's a terrible brag. Honestly, negative. This is just dumb as hell.
I'm a god on Xbox. Now there's no one to stop me. The world is mine.
Says he's a god, except Xbox is now dead, and it never even got a port of God of War. What a sorry excuse for a god. Well, I guess this battle's over. In conclusion, all I can say... Wait, what is this?
I'm sorry, Bill. I'm afraid I can't let you do that.
So in a series first, a third challenger emerges. And not simply a third rapper to fill in for a tag team, but an actual third party joining the battle on a team of their own. Hopefully I can squeeze it in the score area. Yeah, there we go. HAL-9000, the rogue AI from 2001: A Space Odyssey, busts into the battle in what feels especially prescient in the current year where we have actual honest-to-God AI chatbots and AI content slop as hot topics of conversation. And from a theming standpoint, an actual computer coming to rap against two famous computer creators is a stroke of genius, and Hal starts things off strong with a rework of his "Sorry Dave, I can't let you do that" line from the book and movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Let's see where this all goes.
Take a look at your history. Everything you built leads up to me.
It's neutral exposition, but I feel the way these bars basically justify why the computer AI fits into the battle, especially saying that the singularity is the inevitable end result of Gates' work, is honestly pretty great for the plot, even though it might be giving Gates a bit too much credit, but I get it and it all works.
I got the power of a mind you could never be. I'll beat your ass in chess and Jeopardy.
It's kind of funny because this line kind of shifts the character from being HAL-9000 to just artificial intelligence as a whole. This line is referencing IBM's Deep Blue and Watson computers, which famously beat world champions in chess and Jeopardy respectively, and marked public moments where computer AI surpassed human ability. It's a good brag with solid historical references. I'll give it a point.
I'm running C++ saying hello world.
Full disclosure here, I'm not a coder, so correct me down below if I get something wrong, but from my understanding, running C++ isn't much of a brag. It's basically been the most common standard computer coding language for the past 30 years. It'd be like if Bill Gates said, "I speak perfect English." Like, it's not wrong, but it's almost not worth pointing out. The line's saved though because it sounds good and because the hello world bit is a clever historical reference to this being the first message Brian Kernighan had a computer display using the C language he created.
I'll beat you to you singing about a daisy girl.
This is a great line with a clever double meaning. The more obvious is probably the 2001: A Space Odyssey reference with HAL-9000 singing Daisy during his quote-unquote death scene.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too.
But slightly less obviously, this is also a reference to the infamous Daisy Girl ad run by Lyndon Johnson in his presidential race against Barry Goldwater.
8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes.
It ties in well with the upcoming bars, and I think overall, though it is literally an "I'm gonna beat you" line, it's one that's executed well enough to deserve a point.
I'm coming out the socket. Nothing you can do can stop it.
Basically just highlighting the omnipresence of computers and AI, a fact which has only become more prevalent in the decade plus since this battle. Doesn't really say much though, and "I'm coming out the socket" is a weird way of describing being battery powered, but whatever, neutral.
I'm on your lap and in your pocket. How you gonna shoot me down when I got the rocket?
Damn, that's cold. Harkening back to the popular sci-fi dystopia image of AI, something like in The Terminator, where AI launches and guides and nukes to take out humanity. It ties in with that Daisy Girl line from earlier, and it really is such a hardcore rhetorical question that touches on some of the existential dread that AI represents. Honestly, it's a 3. It just goes so damn hard.
Your cortex just doesn't impress me.
I'm on the fence here. It's a great sounding line, and I want to give it a point on vibes alone, but I think neutral just because it really doesn't do enough with the insult. Basically, Hal's saying he's unimpressed by Bill's cerebral cortex, which is essentially the thinking part of the human brain. The implication here being that Hal is running some sort of processor that is way more advanced, but since he doesn't actually specify that part of the diss, it is a little hard to quantify how unimpressive the cortex is by comparison.
So go ahead, try to Turing test me.
The Turing test. Test, aka the artist formerly known as the Imitation Game, was a test developed by Alan Turing in the 1940s and 50s to determine, well, actually what it determines is a sticky subject. See, people have misconstrued and misused it since day one as a way of proving if a computer is sentient, which is also how it's being implied here. Maybe. Again, they don't really do enough with the reference to make that clear, but really, all the Turing test does is prove whether or not a computer can fool a person into believing they're speaking with another person. If you want to see a version of this in action, those kind of cringe Jubilee odd one out videos are basically this concept, but testing for things other than being a computer. And if you want to see some of the serious flaws in this test, I kid you not, go watch the SpongeBob episode where Plankton is in the robot crab suit and SpongeBob does the interrogation. Anyway, I mean, it's a cute little reference, but technically I think Hal here would probably fail a Turing test since he probably wouldn't be able to shut up about robot superiority every question. I don't know, maybe I'm just sick of the lazy references, but I'm giving this a negative. I think the writers are displaying here a fundamental misunderstanding of the Turing test, and even if they're not, this isn't even a good brag or anything since it goes nowhere and we've already established that Hal is a sentient advanced AI, so this just feels totally pointless.
I stomp on a Mac and a PC too. I'm on Linux, bitch. I thought you knew.
That's funny. Easily a point. I'm on Linux, bitch is too good. Explaining GNU and the Linux operating system is above my pay grade and level of expertise, but drastically simplified, the GNU Linux operating system is a third-party alternative to the Apple and Windows software environments, and has for quite a while been considered the preferred software for those with the technical know-how to run it. And I'd say it's basically objectively the best software option since it's open source and allows so much more control and customization for the user. And more relevant to the battle, it is the most common software used on supercomputers. So Hal using Linux not only is a great brag that he's on the best software, but is also a very accurate brag. Great job to everyone involved with writing this specific line.
My CPU's hot, but my cold one's cold.
This is just aura farming because it sounds good, but it doesn't make a ton of sense. The CPU is the central processing unit. It basically is the part of the computer that executes commands, so it's pretty integral, and they do also produce a lot of heat. So running hot makes sense, but also cooling the CPU is important while a computer is running, so a hot CPU isn't necessarily something to brag about. And then the core is a specific part of the CPU, so it kind of doesn't make sense for the core to be cold while the CPU is hot. I don't know, maybe I'm super wrong here and someone who builds PCs can explain how this doesn't contradict, but I'm saying a negative because I really think this is total gibberish technobabble.
Featuring 17 lines of code.
God, this battle's been a tough one for research. So I think this is a reference to some lawsuit between Linux and maybe IBM or something regarding 17 lines of code that were allegedly stolen during some situation where they were both working for the military. Maybe. And also, this is the 17th bar of Hal's rap, so maybe that's the reference. I don't know. I'm saying neutral because I'm in too deep on this one and don't feel comfortable trying to determine if this would deserve a point or not, but there you go.
I think different from the engine of the days old. Hasta la vista, like the Terminator told ya.
That's cold. Again, playing on some of the sci-fi apocalypse tropes, and it's a great closer, so I'll say a point. For me, this battle is simply goated. Yeah, I wasn't too impressed by the Bill Gates lines, but they still sounded pretty great overall, and he had a couple hard hitters. Theming-wise, it's a perfect battle. Among the best, and especially at the time, was really nailing the cultural zeitgeist. The switch-up with the third challenger emerging was done so well, and you all know I'm a sucker for any time we expand what's actually possible within a battle on a technical level. And Hal-9000 has truly some fire bars, especially for a robot. But I'm bearing the lead here, of course. Nice, Peter. I mean, Steve Jobs is one of his finest hours, truly a masterpiece of character work on his part. Now to our fan analyses. Regarding this battle, Poner is generally positive. He feels that the battle peaks in the first verse though, and isn't too fond of the back and forth, although a big bravo for the inclusion of Hal and the accompanying premonition of AI taking over. Poner's also of the opinion that the personalities don't quite fit, with Jobs being too cool and not an asshole enough, which I'm not sure I agree there, Poner, and Gates raging too hard, which I absolutely do agree with. Also, Poner's fun fact for this one, Nice Peter didn't love the initial Jobs-Gates matchup idea, and Peter, you're wrong for that, and he was only really convinced about it after Hal was brought on board. Also, apparently Bill Gates banned from Xbox Live, which that's a crazy sentence to exist in this world. My god. And Timey also had a good opinion of this battle, describing it as probably peak ERB. And while there's plenty of other battles that she personally likes more for one reason or another, this one has to be one of the quintessential examples of what a good bread and butter battle should be, with even some extra toppings to appreciate. Great theming with a real-life historical rivalry, an infuriatingly catchy beat, funny back and forth moments, and so much more. And Steve dies of ligma, so it has to be the GOAT. Thank both of you for the analysis. I have more or less the same overall feelings regarding this battle. I've considered it a highlight pretty much from the moment I saw it. When it was released, it definitely felt like easily the best battle so far, and watching it now, it still feels like a moment where you can tell the ERB cast and crew were really hitting their stride. I mean, compare this to literally anything in Season 1 and we're in a totally different universe. In a rocket ship, passing by, defying all the laws of gravity. And if you're going my way, come fly with me, because next time we'll find out if these guys can keep the world on a string or if they'll crack under pressure. Thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll catch you next time.